a pretty good young man make extraordinary developments over the 2 years that he was there. And that momentum has continued. And it was super inspirational for me as an entrepreneur and a business owner and someone that's had the honor to lead other young men and employees. And I just noticed like I had this heightened level of awareness that everywhere I went, I paid close attention to the lack of leadership and the consequences, or good or great leadership and the positive impact that it had. And the more I paid attention to it, the more I found it was just rampant. And almost every problem I saw in a team or an individual or a community, I could always source it back to the lack of leadership. I was just blown away. And it was on my heart to try and do something about it, particularly with the younger generation, and try and speak to them about the importance of leadership and then how to do it. And our pathway or our mission in doing that is to get leaders on this podcast and just hear their story, and then use that on the platforms that we have to hopefully inspire aspiring leaders or current leaders, and just remind them of how important it is, the work that they're doing and what the consequences are. So just wanted you to have some additional context there. And again, thank you so much for making time today and being willing to share with us.
Well, I wanted to be here. Definitely means a lot, and yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Coach K, did you have anything you wanted to open with?
No, I'm excited to have Frank with us. Right, I see the office there in the background. Right, when I got to be there for one of our past pods, I know we were excited. And when Frank said, "Oh, do I need to go to a location to be part of the?" We said no. Like, we want you to be right there, because that's as classic and authentic of a coach's office as there is. And so to be able to have you there is great. But no, I'm excited for this. I've known Frank for probably 6 years now. And
it's way more than that. It's probably more like 10.
10 could be. Yeah, shoot, it could be. But working with him and seeing how he works with not only his assistant coaches but his athletes, and then obviously younger athletes in a camp environment, has been really intriguing. And he's had my son at his camp, one of his camp sessions in the summer. So I've also heard how my son has been impacted by Frank. So I'm excited to learn more and hopefully have some really cool nuggets for our listeners to take with them as they go through this world of leading and coaching and just impacting the next generation.
Yeah. So, Coach, I'm going to give a little bit of a bio that we have based on our notes, just to in the opening here, to give people some background into who you are, and then we'll just get started. So, meet Coach Frank Biller, head coach of UVA rowing. Coach discovered rowing as a teenager when his mother introduced it as a way out of trouble. He quickly fell in love with the sport and was captivated by the combination of power, technique, and camaraderie. His early training in Switzerland under some of the best coaches instilled in him a coaching philosophy that balances a relaxed environment with meticulous attention to detail. His leadership style was further shaped by his military service, where he learned the importance of authenticity, empathy, and leading by example. Coach Biller's coaching approach blends technical precision with mental and emotional resilience, while incorporating mindfulness and the power of attention to help athletes reach their full potential. Despite facing significant adversity, Coach Biller remains focused on holistic success, valuing team development and well-being as much as winning championships. Let's start with, there was a couple, as we read through that, I'd love to hear how you are able to balance relaxed environments with meticulous attention to detail. When I just read those, it sounds very hard to balance focus And even the word the meticulous makes me unrelaxed when I say it out loud. So if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then first and foremost, I'd love to hear your philosophy on balancing, not even balancing, it says here combining relaxed and a meticulous focus. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
I think a lot of it comes out from the nature of the sport of rowing, where it is very repetitive. You take the same stroke over and over. It is technically speaking a very simple movement, but it's not an easy movement. It is requires you, especially in racing, to go into the well every single time, physically, emotionally, mentally. Um, it especially in long training sessions when you're out there rowing for 60 70 minutes constant or 80 minutes, to kind of your mind is going to wander, right? You're going to start thinking and paying attention to stuff that has nothing to do with what you're doing. There is always self-doubt and self-judgment creeping in, and so but at the same time you're moving together as a unit with other people, and you're out in nature. You're out on the water, which almost all humans admire that, enjoy that. And so there's a lot of stuff going on. And it's actually one of those sports where it allows you to be relaxed in your mind, relaxed in your movements between the drive, between the strokes, where you want to let the boat run, give yourself a short little break, and then take that next really powerful, intense stroke. So the sport itself already has this like sort of balance built into it, as opposed to other sports where it's like short bursts, set plays, where you're playing in opposition directly, often man to man, body to body. We don't have that. We're kind of like sort of loose and floating, and yet we're pushing ourselves to a level that we didn't think we could. So a lot of it is integrated in the sport, or the sport allows it, for that to happen. To actually requires to combine these aspects in order to be successful. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Two things you said there, I want to dig a little bit deeper on. One was, I said into the well.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. I think I know. By the way, I have a gym in my basement, and there's 15 pieces of equipment. My least favorite piece of equipment,
your ergometer,
the rower.
Yeah.
I do, this will be laughable to you, 500 meters. And my goal is always I started like under 2 minutes. And then like, if I can get under like a minute 50, I feel like a world-class athlete. I'm sure you'd laugh at that, but I go through like, it's total body exhaustion. It's like at one point it's like my back and then my legs and then just my cardiovascular at some point. It's like, dude, you're pushing yourself here. It's tough. And it's amazing. I've always admired rowing from the first day I got on the rower, probably 15 years ago, because I get done and it's like my arms and legs just kind of hang there for a little bit. But tell us a little bit, but what's this sort of requirement of going into the well that you have for your athletes?
Well, I mean, I want to be specific to that. The going into the well that you're describing, where you're like completely exhausted, you couldn't take another stroke, that happens. The truth that there is, going to the edge of it, there is going out of the comfort zone and kind of this intensity levels, and truly going to the well. You do that like maybe 4 or 5 times a year, but you really have to do it. But then it's going to feel like when you've done your 500 meters and now you have another 1,500 to go. So you're 500 in and everything is running in the red. Everything, your body is screaming stop, and you just keep going. And you pay attention to what you're doing and not what your body is telling you. That is going to the well. Going to the well is when you're 1250 out of 2,000 meters, so you're just over halfway through the race, and that's usually when races are won. Is to then, when the coxswain calls for another 10 to move away from the other boat, to go to a place that you're, given how much further you have to go, you're absolutely not prepared to do it mentally, but you just have to execute it and then worry about what comes later. And that is truly going to the well. To do something that's completely out of your comfort zone is good. You have an outcome that's unknown. You don't know what the result's going to be. You don't know how you're going to react to it necessarily. And when we do this on the rowing machine, on the ergometer, as we call it, then chances are you're going to blow up, and you're just basically you're going to finish, but you're going to finish pretty weak. And the dynamic in the boat is a little bit different because you have a team dynamic, you have an energy exchange between the athletes. That, of course, is a skill that you need to learn. And some magic power basically keeps you going. And of course, if you are able to get ahead, because in rowing, unlike other racing sports, if you're leading and you row backwards, right? So I see who is behind us. So if you're able to get ahead and you see the opposition behind you struggling to keep up, unbelievable amount of energy right there. And so the mentality, the psychology of racing is quite different because of that. But that's going to the well. It's like literally doing something that you don't know you're capable of, and you just blindly execute it and just put the foot down.
And so when you're talking about going to, when you hit on this a little bit when you were describing the differences between Europe and the learning model there compared to the US, just on that side, the ability to go back to the well, the ability to, but where do you see the difference culturally, right, in Europe compared to in the States? And then how did you, or do you on a regular basis as a coach here in the States, how do you, right, combat that and give kind of your mix, which I know you mentioned also, to be able to have that mix of both cultures would be the ultimate as a coach and as a competitor. But explain a little bit about the, going to the well and how that would be different if I grew up in Europe in that culture compared to here.
I think, and I'm going to simplify this a lot, okay? But the mentality in the U.S. and the way the sport's done in the U.S. is, most people start out in college or maybe in high school, and they get put into 8-people boats right away, which is what we race predominantly in college rowing in the U.S. But in the Olympics, you're racing all the Olympic boat classes. So the single scull, so one person, a two-person boat, 4-person boat, 8-person boat. And in the U.S., pretty much right off the bat, they do a lot of work in the 8. So you have this sort of herd and tribe or pack mentality that plays in. And training traditionally has been just, like we're starting with our new guys tomorrow. And so they're going to get a few weeks of introduction, and then things are already going to get competitive. And within 5-6 weeks from now, they're going to have their first race, which will be horrific from a technical point of view, but it will be really intense mentally and physically. And so a lot of intensity, a lot of racing, a lot of competitive situations. And the European approach is much more, also because it's club-based. It's like usually smaller groups that learn to row together. So as opposed to having a team of 70 plus that we have, my team at our like small rowing club, we would have like 12. And so we do a lot more work in smaller boats. We have a lot more focus on learning to row first in a boat, in a small boat, learning on your own in a single scull maybe, with a real focus on technique and proper skill. And also with more of a fun and playful approach, especially with younger athletes before racing gets serious. So case in point, when I started rowing in like the summer, I didn't have my first race until the following April. So I spent this whole time just, learning how to row first. And then with that came a little bit the physiological aspect of starting to train endurance and maybe a little bit of weights and the whole winter training where you really get trained as an athlete. And then your racing starts. And I got to say, the downside of that is I didn't even know what the well was really until my first race. And it was like a big like poof, wow, this is how it's going to feel. All right, I guess I know now. And in the US, people know right away intensity. They will know right away what it means to battle together. But the execution is sometimes not very skillful. I mean, we call that bad rowing, basically. where it's just kind of oars are flailing around, and people are working really, really hard, but they're not really efficient. And at the end, though, with the experience of racing, whether that's over the course of a year, or whether that's over the course of 4 years, or maybe 10 years for like an Olympic athlete, everything kind of improves over time, obviously. And as you get better at the sport, as you get better, physiologically, that well kind of moves forward. I describe it often to the guys here. I'm like, look, if you are a third or fourth year here at UVA and you've done, 2 or 3 years of really solid training, it's still going to feel exactly the same when you hit the well. You're just going to be faster. It never gets easier. You get more skillful with it because you've done it more often, so you kind of know what's going to happen. But I think one of the single most important parts is that you learn that if you tap into your human superpower of the mind, hence the power of attention, then you're going to learn to deal with that event much more skillful, and you're able to kind of push away or keep in front of you where you hit that spot, that point of no return. Like you feel it's coming, but you're not paying attention to it. You're paying attention to your action, to your rowing, rather than to your screaming body. So there's a big learning curve involved, and experience is required. And I think one of the biggest parts is actually for athletes to buy in how important the mental aspect of the game is. You can work out and train all you want, and you can, physically you're there, technically you're there, but if the mind doesn't come along with the other progress that you're making, then you're just not getting to your best. Okay. So I would say the American approach is a lot more like, run and gun and just hit it hard right off the bat. The European approach is much more finesse and technique first, and then we're going to worry about racing later. Which I will say the Europeans in general are just a lot softer when it comes to that, and the Americans are, a lot maybe harder, tougher, more hardened, at least physically, but then lack the technical skill to execute it. And I think if we combine the two worlds where we have, like I mentioned, you mentioned in my intro, meticulous to technique. So even if we are working hard, we are not going to abandon skill. We're not going to abandon the execution of the movement while we're working hard. But it's not just one or the other. We always want to have both of them. Now, are they able to do that? Absolutely not, because it's a learning curve, but we stress that, we focus on that a lot, and we talk about it all the time.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting something you said there, and I'm really like gravitating and wrapping my head around this theory of going to the well, and it's super relevant this morning. We have at our company morning workouts that the team are invited to come in to start their day before our normal hours, and this morning especially was difficult. Fridays are always deadlift day, and I don't know. I've met a very small group of people that enjoy leg day, and I'm not necessarily one of them. And we were talking today, and I don't know. Let's say the goal for this particular movement was 10 reps, and the first guy that did deadlifts did 12, and everybody's like, "Yeah!" And he was cheering, and it was like, then the next guy, who was me, did 13. And then the guy after me did 14. And what I watched, it was like in that moment, like everybody probably only thought they could do 10. But because someone pushed them, they got 11. And then, God bless the last guy, because I think he had to do like 16, right? And it was, actually, I think it was a female, right? She wasn't as big or as strong as the rest of the people that were doing it. And what I said in that moment was like, what if we only started counting reps when we wanted to quit? The first 10 don't matter, right? We weren't in the well, so to speak. Like the real work or growth happens, it gives me goosebumps talking about it, when you want to quit, right? Like, so yeah. The first rep is when I'm like, oh man, I'm done. I don't think I can do anymore. I want to quit. But I'm looking there, and there's Coach K, and he's like, come on, dude, come on, man, you got one more. Or he's encouraging her. Like for me, it's not anybody like saying something to me sometimes is I feel like I'm letting somebody else down, because I'll let myself down sometimes. I'll make up an excuse or I'll let myself off the hook, but I can't let Coach Frank down. I can't let Coach Cade down, right? I feel like sometimes maybe that's the American part of it, right? Like I don't know what the difference is culturally between European or American, but I think what you said about the style of rowing, you could almost just paste that on the American culture as a whole, where we're not maybe as technical, or I don't know that anybody would describe the American culture as finesse, right? We're just maybe louder and we work harder, or sometimes we come together better as a team. But it was amazing as I was sitting there trying to recover from doing 13 reps of deadlift. Like, what if I only started counting when I wanted to quit?
I think that's a great point. And to what you're saying about the culture and the approach to those things, I think that's where the American way is just superior, because we're pushing each other, right? For us having a big team, I mean, ultimately in rowing, when national championship rolls around,
Coach Frank, just real quick, when you say big team, give us some context. What's a big team? What's the team look like?
So we're one of the bigger teams. There is several others, like 5, 6, that are just our size, but we're going to field like 12 different boats at national championship. But the single most important boat is always the first 8, right? That's where the best, fastest guys are. That's the boat that we have the obligation and to put the fastest guys in, to live up to the obligation of competition, and that's the most prestigious event. So you could argue, well, why don't we just race that one boat and everyone else is just like basically in the farm team or on the practice squad, you know? But it's exactly that competition where, you know, the guy that's in, let's say we'll field 3 8s and then a bunch of small boats and stuff. So we have the first 8, second 8, third 8. There's a guy in the third 8 that would like to be in the second 8, and the guy in the second 8 wants to be in the first 8, and the guys in the first 8 are representing the whole program. They're the flagship. They're the tip of the spear. So they all push each other, motivate each other by doing that. And that is like the basic sort of idea of a competitive environment within a team that pushes athletes to do better, to train more diligent, to do all the extra workouts when no one's watching, to do the best they can, to perform at their best. And often we talk about, the winning mindset. Okay. And that's a pretty decent base. And what I've been working on, I would say like 12 plus years now, after some initial success, we had to start refining it a little bit because it wasn't that easy, is to change from a winning mindset into performance mindset. Because a performance mindset in a way is more difficult to live by because it requires you to perform at your best in the moment of given the circumstances at all times. And it's not focused on the outcome, it's focused on the process and how you go through it. So that includes the process and the path of 9 months of training leading up to national championship. It even includes not just the race, but even the race broken down into its different bits and pieces, depending on what the race plan is. And to stay in the moment and to stay in the process and to trust the process and to execute it. But another big aspect to what you're saying, what your observation, I think, is 100% right, because everyone may have a different motivation why they're going to add on another 1 or 2 reps in that workout. Some of them just don't want to lose. They just want to beat the guy that just went, right? Some of them get inspired by the person that just did 12 reps instead of just 10. Other people look at it and say, well, if they can do 12 and 13 reps, why shouldn't I try doing 14 reps? The outcome is all the same for all these different, points of motivation. I think the thing to aspire to is to not have to overcome the preconceived notion that I'm going to do 10 reps and to be, I wouldn't even say inspired, I would say to be energized, to get the energy of the person that just did 12 reps in front of them, to feel their success is going to carry over to what they're about to do. So instead of being intimidated that this person just did 12 reps, I'm just so happy for this person having done 12 reps that the first 12 reps for me are free. And I'm going to add on one, and I'm going to raise the bar, not because I want to be the best or I want to put the other ones down. I'm simply going to raise the bar because I can. I'm going to try to do it. And if I do my job, then that is going to inspire someone else to do it. And we call that the gift of competition, the gift of the teammate, the gift to yourself. In fact, we break it down the other way, where we have the three gifts, which is the first gift is to yourself, the second gift is to your teammates, and the third gift is to your competition, and in that order. Meaning that you have to look after yourself first, right? You have to do your job. You have to hold yourself accountable. You have to make sure that you eat and fuel and sleep, to do the extra training, and also the mental health and the mental state that you are able to perform. You have to look after yourself, similar to the airline safety video that no one watches, but where the mom puts the oxygen mask on before the baby,
Yeah.
right? Because I can save all the babies I want, but if I die in the process, then all the babies are going to die too. And it's a very human nature that we always want to look after our teammates first. And very often nowadays, it's also a deflection from dealing with our own problems, our own challenges, our own issues, is we run around and just help everyone else and make ourselves feel good with that, which is totally fine. Obviously, I'm supporting the behavior of supporting teammates, but it's important that every teammate, whether that's in a business, whether that's in a sports team, in the military, wherever there's high performance is required, you got to look after yourself first to make sure you got your stuff in order. And then the second gift is giving that to your teammates. So pulling someone along, pushing someone in front, hold someone accountable, give someone a hug and say, I love you. Sometimes it means serving a shit sandwich. That's a really tough one. When you have teammates that are not quite doing their job or are slacking on something or display behavior that's not acceptable, to then step up and either sort it out yourselves or bring the attention to a coach or a boss, so that we can address it on a team level. But that within the team is super important. That's what I mean. When you do 12 reps and I'm going to do 13 reps, I'm going to do one extra rep for myself. I'm going to do one extra rep for you. And I'm going to do one extra rep for everyone in the room to set the bar. The three gifts. And then the third gift, and that's the one that's sort of like where we are a little bit out there, I guess, is the gift of the competition. Because we owe it to the competition to bring forward our best performance. Because only if we have the best performances happening from all the boats involved or any competitor involved, that is what pushes us to the next level, right? That is what allows us to go to the well, because no one goes to the well on their own on a regular basis all the time. Like, we have no motivation to do that, but it's the competition that does it. And if we look at it instead of like, I'm going to beat you, I'm going to dominate you, and whatever words are being thrown around in sports, unfortunately, it's like, no, I'm going to do it. It's an act of love that I'm going to give you the gift of competition, because only then can you rise to a level, maybe even rise to a level that you didn't know existed. And I get goosebumps saying those words, because that is the essence of like this wow moment that you realize something just happened that you didn't think was possible. And it was, in the end, it was only because the other ones showed up to race, right? The other ones showed up to compete. And we want to share that experience. And it's not about, just participating. We absolutely want to win. We're going to the starting line to win the race. We don't go to the starting line to just make them feel good for racing us. It's much more than that. We go into the starting line and we could look left and right and say, I love you, brother, but I'm going to break your heart because you're going to have to do something extraordinary to beat me today. On one side, Well,
we come right out of the Olympics, where how many stories did we hear right after that race of the competitors talking about how the one next to them brought out right the best in them, and that together they both ended up PRing, right, and they didn't think they could do that, but that bar was set because of that competition. I mean, what better example than to sit there and watch, right, the Olympics for those 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks and see that time and again. One of the things you mentioned earlier, Frank, you talked about the performance mindset. And again, I reflect back to the Olympics and how many of these athletes were, right, they're training for 4 years for this, right, for this moment. And you would hear the, I don't know if it's the mentally healthiest of the athletes, but they would come out of that and talk about, I did my best. I performed to the best of my ability, whether that was gold, silver, bronze, or I didn't even medal, but they were proud of the performance that they gave, because that is where their mind has been. And it probably goes back to leadership and coaching of whoever put that in their mind over those last few years of, we want to go out there and we're going to, we trusted the process, and now we're going to perform freely and perform to the best, of our ability. And that's what we're trying to do. And that could mean gold, right? That could mean a PR. That could mean, right, winning the race. But we're worried about, right, that performance and competing and doing the best that we can do. I thought that was, tremendous. That obviously you hit on that in the way that you build your program and the types of things that you impart on your athletes. But then I think we saw it time and again, in the Olympics as well, that whole idea of the performance mindset. Thank you for sharing that and bringing that to light, because that's huge for us.
And Cade, go back a couple Olympiads. So one of the best Swiss rowers was Sino Muller, and Sino, at a very young age, he was selected to represent Switzerland in a single in Barcelona in '92, and he came in there. He had a big mouth, what he's going to do and all that, and he kind of sort of epically failed. Finished like, I think, 7th or 8th, which was still good, but he was talking about winning it, which is very un-Swiss, because he partially grew up in the States and was a great attitude. But at those Olympics, he went up to some of the guys that were like the big stars, and he was looking up to them, and he wanted to sort of like connect with them. Or I think the story goes, he asked the Canadian singles scholar for an autograph, and the guy basically kind of blew him off. I'm like, you little shit, get out of my face kind of thing. And that made Stino so mad. And he just trained for 4 years with a lot of anger. And every practice he would do another 10 hard strokes or so just to think about this Canadian. And then in the '96 Olympics in Atlanta, where he won the gold, he was in the middle with the gold medal, and the Canadian was on his side. And none of these guys looked at each other, right? And Sino is an awesome guy. Like, he's come a long, long way since then. But just like that is how sports were done in the '90s and even the early 2000s. And then you look at what started out in a little bit in 2012 and 16, where you saw them talking about each other. You saw they started taking the winner. So the second and third place single scholar would take the winner on their shoulders for the picture with the medals. Became a tradition. They started, and that was really led by Mahe Drysdale, the Kiwi, the New Zealander, who is a very, very close friend of mine, and I've had the pleasure to work with him on multiple occasions. And he was the one that came in and just had fun with it. It's like, look, guys, we're all working way too hard for just doing this. Like, we need to have fun with each other. And they started like even going to training camps together, like sort of like doing the off season. They started communicating. Mahe was the godfather of Olaf Tufte's first child. And that guy took a gold medal away from him back in 2008. And so, the whole dynamic changed. And I think you saw a lot of that in this Olympics. Like UK, I noticed that how athletes were talking so different about it. It was not like me, look at me, Olympic gold medalist, I beat all you little, shits over there. And it turned into like much more of a togetherness, which doesn't take away from what they did. Like, they didn't race any softer or any slower, or didn't try any less hard. In fact, they maybe even tried harder, because they have an emotional connection, or at least they know or respect their competition to the degree where if I know that I was able to win and you were second, that even adds to the value of what I have just done. because I know how good you are and how much I respect you. And because of that, I'll be eternally grateful. And it even goes the other way where, if I'm the favorite and you win, or it can be third or fourth or whatever, and at the end of the day, I had the performance of my lifetime simply because you were there. And if you weren't there pushing it, I would have been like, whatever. And we even go to the point where we talk about, of course, every time you win, you celebrate a little bit, right? It's okay. I mean, we're there to win. Winning is fun. There's no doubt about it. But in terms of the life experience of a human, of an athlete, the races where you actually performance of a lifetime and you came up short, those races you're going to remember forever. And it's not because of the anger and being pissed off for not having won. That might be in the moment. That might be a factor for a few hours, a few days, maybe a few weeks. But down the road, you're going to look back and you'll be like, that was the most unbelievable race. That experience, to have had that performance to a level I didn't expect, didn't know existed. And even though I came up short, is much more valuable than just an easy, shallow win.
Yeah.
And especially in college sports. I mean, you can always, plan a race or a dual race that we do sometimes against a weak opponent just to get yourself ready for the season. I mean, we all do it. Football does it. Basketball does it. Get in a couple easy wins maybe early on. Why not? But are you going to celebrate these wins like big time? No, you just chalk them off. It's like that was a maybe even it might be that you win as expected, but you actually had a terrible performance. Like you rode like total crap. And when you come back, like, okay, you done your job. That's important too, because sometimes you also got to get the job done when you don't have a great performance, because they don't come in by the dozen, right? They're hard to get. But take this right away as let's not dwell in this win for the next 5 days. Let's go right back to work, because clearly there are things we have to work on. And so, yeah, that's why the performance piece to me is so important, because that also carries over from sports into the real world after they graduate or after they retire. Because, athletes that have never experienced failures, they're not going to be great athletes. Humans that haven't dealt with failure and have accepted failure and knew how to get back up, as opposed to just, knowing how to win all the time, they're just not going to be as valuable when it matters. And I doubt there is any highly successful people that have not experienced some significant failures and F-ups. They just don't talk about it. The media doesn't talk about it. They always glorify, the wins, but they never talk about the suffering, making it almost look easy to people on the outside.
There's two things I want to bundle up that you just said that I think is gold. Number one is when you just talked about like the focus on not so much the outcome, but the performance. And yes, we won, but was our performance up to our standards? And then your ability and willingness to take your team and get them right back to work on improving their performance. That is actual leadership. Like I always argue with a friend of mine who's a big basketball guy, and he hates on Steve Kerr. But he's like, oh, the Golden State Warriors. Like, come on, man. I could have coached them to 3 championships. And I tend to differ, right? I think that may be the hardest job, is taking 5 world-class athletes that perform at a high level and getting them all to care as much about the same thing while being them individual selves, which is something you have in your notes here about the balance of like caring for yourself, right, first, and then teammates, and then the opponent. So like that moment of what you just said that's leadership. I think a lot of times leadership and coaching and all this is like this mythical like contribution that we make to the world. You're taking a group of people and a team and getting the absolute best out of them, right? That is leadership. It's invaluable. I'm of the belief that it's a life or death situation, I think. The second thing, and I lost my train of thought there, but there's a second thing that you said there about failure, right? And you said, hey, I don't think you can even, I almost wouldn't trust someone that's not comfortable with failure. And I think that goes back to what you talked about, going to the well. like well is embracing failure and then pushing just beyond it, right? Whether that's getting back up or mentally failing, but physically pushing through it. Like my brain's telling me my body is done, but my body has more to give, right? So it's like this constant, like love and hate affair with failure, where it's like in the moment, we fight so hard to not lose, but it hurts and it exhausts us and it's mentally and physically and emotionally draining. And if you're ever going to become or reach any level of greatness, if you haven't developed a loving relationship with failure, I don't know that I can trust you, because you may opt out of a difficult project, or you may opt out of an uncomfortable conversation, or you may opt out of extra practice, or something you said earlier is, what do they do when nobody's looking? If you're scared of failure, I almost can't trust you, which is crazy to think about, right? Because failure gets like a bad name. It's like, behind the scenes, guys like you and Coach Cade love it. But like when you look at what is publicly, it's like everybody like makes fun of the people that fail, when in reality, your willingness to fail is probably, in our business, we talk a lot about lead indicators, which is like that. What does our performance look like at the top of our funnel that we know will hopefully eventually lead us to a victory? We put a ton of emphasis on the top of the funnel. Are we doing the right behaviors and activities, right? And if we do them at what we call do I have the right people doing the right stuff the right way? Winning will come, right?
Yes.
So I just wanted to bundle up what I heard you say, and it was absolute gold, and I appreciate you sharing that. I'd love to pivot us into your background of the military and NCO school, and your like pre-show input you put in here. Something I think is amazing, and I want to make sure that we get this wisdom from you. You said in NCO school they hammered into you about being yourself and treating others like they want to be treated, and this has been a pivotal part of how you shaped your leadership style. And you said you can love people, and then in parentheses you said, and still kind of be a hard ass. And I think there's always like this unwillingness, like what we say, and we have a set of values here, and what we talk about here is accountability, and accountability is something you do for people you love. Like we want to have that perspective, right? It's not, you're not being hard on somebody, like you said, serving them a shit sandwich. It's like, that's done from a place of love. If someone's going to allow me to have bad behavior and slack in practice and not do my best, they're actually, they're not serving me. They're not being a good friend. So if you could talk a little bit about how NCO school shaped your perspective of this sort of combination of like, love and kindness, but at the same time pushing somebody when in the moment it may feel like you're serving them a shit sandwich.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, in Switzerland we have mandatory service, and always you can try to get into different MOS, as you say in the US, what your job is in the military. And of course, I came right off the junior national team. I thought I was, hot shit. And so I want to do the hardest thing you can do, which is, the Grenadiers, which is sort of similar to special operations, Ranger battalion kind of stuff. A lot of like shaved heads, a lot of shouting, a lot of yelling, a lot of high paced stuff, a lot of intensity. Everyone's super motivated. Everyone's an athlete. I was like in the bottom third of an athlete because I'm not super fast in a runner. I do run fast with a full pack on relatively, but I had to like really bite. I had to bite hard to make it through. But apparently it was pretty good. So, because everyone wants to like move up the ranks, which is very specific to that unit. In general Army, you probably don't find that much motivation, obviously, because it's mandatory. But then you do more days, so there comes more responsibility. So that's like a little bit the background. So it takes really motivated people to even be in this unit. And then those who want it, everyone wants to advance, so they're all motivated, right? And your cadre, your NCOs, they're pretty hard on you because they were ridden pretty hard just previously when they were recruits. And so now they're kind of handing it back. And they want you to be up to the standard. They want you to be the best. They want you to be as good as they were or better. That's each time, that's the goal. And so you always have a few NCOs that are, and mind you, we're doing all this in like express train speed. So it's not like in the US where you come in and you're like a private specialist and maybe a corporal, then a sergeant, and you're signing a 3-year contract, and if you don't mess up too much, you become a sergeant. Like for us, it's a militia system. We have no time. Everything has to be super efficient. There is no downtime. It's constant learning, constant going. So I did my basic training in summer of 95, and in summer of 96, I was already there now serving time as an NCO, right? NCO school is 6 weeks. It's all about leadership. It's all about small team tactics. So someone has to lead the group and so on. And the professional instructors who are excellent, they just watch you like a hawk on everything that you're doing, and you get constantly evaluated. And you can see how some of the guys are just like overly motivated. And it's also the time where, Full Metal Jacket was available on VHS tape that people would watch and be like, oh, I'm going to be this like real hard ass. And the instructors were just telling us like, be yourself. You're leading people that are going to trust you. Be authentic. With authentic behavior comes trust. They feel like they know you. They will know that you care for them. They will listen to you. And if you just put on this hard shell, then you may scare everyone for a week or so, but they're going to see all right through you. Like they're just going to read you. They're going to read you like a book. And that's exactly what happened with some of the guys that just wouldn't listen. They're like, no, I'm just going to be the biggest hard ass there is. And they just failed epically. They all ended up doing admin work later on when the fun stuff happened. When you actually go out and blow up stuff and shoot guns and do all the crazy stuff, those were the guys pushing papers in the rear, because they needed the ones that were listening and were able to lead to take charge, because now you are in charge as a 22-year-old. You're in charge of a 20-year-old that just 12 weeks ago had his rifle issued, and now you're doing live fire combat drills that in the U.S. Army you only do pre-deployment training. So it's pretty high speed and potentially dangerous. And so they needed to be able to trust people. And for me, it was like a relief to hear that we were be yourself. Like, look, we picked you for this job because we know you can do it. So now continue to be like you are, and don't try to be something else just because someone, pins a couple chevrons on your collar. I think it's the same in coaching. You're an athlete. You're interested in coaching. You're starting to do the coaching thing. You don't have to turn into a different person to do that, because if you are not authentic, if you're not yourself, then people will kind of just know that something's off, and they just going to have a hard time trusting you. And if the people that you are leading on are trusting you, I mean, we always say like you don't lead with the rank, you lead with the heart. They will buy in, they will follow you, do whatever you want. And as you said correctly, they also know that when you have to put the foot down, especially when it comes to discipline, that's just non-negotiable. They just got to fall in rank. They got to follow the, especially when it comes to safety stuff. They got to just do what they're told to do. And if they don't, then you have to put the foot down. But they will always know why you're doing it. It's not because you're abusing them. It's not because, and of course the language matters. Now, language in coaching is probably a little bit different with university students than it was in the military, for sure. We also don't address each other as, Sergeant so-and-so. It's just Frank. But regardless, like you said, I have to hold them accountable. I have to put the foot down. And, also sometimes when you say something calmly, close up into someone's ear, that is a lot more holy shit, he's serious, than if you just yell in front of the group. So you praise in public and you criticize in private, unless it's really bad.
I like that.
And that had a profound impact on me.
What's that?
So that experience had a profound impact on me.
Yeah, and it's crazy. You're the second person that from military experience. There was a mentor of mine that was a Navy SEAL, and early on in our interaction, he said, "Listen, the first thing we got to do is we got to make sure everybody in the team trusts each other." right? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I had this perception about how you go about that. It's this lengthy, like, process of like winning together and making commitments and then living up to them. And while that's all important, and he goes, no, no, no. The quickest path to trust is through vulnerability. And I was like, what? Like, you're a Navy SEAL. You kill people in mass for fun. Like, what do you mean? Like, you can't be vulnerable and weak. And he's like, no, he's like, I can't trust you. And he's like, trust is everything when we're in the SEALs. He's like, everybody has a clear plan. It's life or death circumstances. If I can't trust you to say when you need help, if I can't trust you to tell me when you don't understand the plan, if I can't trust you to acknowledge, in the military, it's like something you have to know when to lead and when to be led. He's like, hey,
Yeah.
if my tactical expertise is in logistics but not in strategy, and I need to give up my leadership seat to someone that's ranking way below me because they're more of an expert. And he's, if you're not willing to be that vulnerable and you're always positioning and politicking, we're going to get killed. There's no way it's going to work out. And it really opened my mind, because I think a lot of times as coaches and leaders, we believe that we have to have this hard exterior shell so that people will constantly follow us. And that was the first time that I ever heard anybody tell me that vulnerability was one of the most critical aspects of rallying a team and getting them to follow you. So it's amazing to hear that your military experience, it sounds like, sort of introduced that to you.
No, absolutely. And I will even add, like I always say, that I think that for me, one way to define manhood, tough guy, masculinity, whatever you want to name that, whatever is appropriate nowadays, I kind of lose track. But if you want to know who is the hardest guy in the room, it's the guy that goes up in front of a group and talks about vulnerability, because that really empowers people as well. Because if one guy does it, others will follow. And now we're going to exactly what you mentioned. Now we know much more about each other, and we build trust because we're trusting each other, sharing vulnerability. And we make it for those, because everyone struggles. You have a room full of guys, everyone struggles with something, like, or teammates, everyone struggles with something. And you go up and talk about it, it makes others feel a lot more comfortable because they have it too. And now someone's talking about it. And when I talk with the guys about stuff, I bring forward my own vulnerabilities all the time. I have no shame. I have no filter. Like, specifically, like when we talk about racing, I'm like, look, if you come to the 500 out of 1,000 and you haven't thought about quitting or doubting yourself, then something's wrong with you. Like, if you feel like you're the only one in the room that's like scared at that moment, then no, that's not the case, because everyone in here is. Some just don't want to share it, but I'm sharing it with you right now. Like, if you don't think about quitting coming to that point, then you're probably fucked up in the head. So you're probably a psychopath. But knowing that, you overcome that, and it's just like the fear that any, like, for example, Navy SEAL will tell you, it's like, well, yeah, fear is, it's a safety trigger. I mean, of course you have fear, but the difference between having fear and being fearless is that you overcome that fear. And I will say, even go a step further, you don't even try to push it away or ignore it. You simply acknowledge it. You acknowledge the vulnerability, you acknowledge the fear, you acknowledge the hardship, you acknowledge, like, you're doing a hard workout, a hard session, you acknowledge the fact that you're about to blow up. And then you have a choice. You can fight it, or you can acknowledge it. And if you acknowledge it with a smile, goosebumps, man. Like, unbelievable power. Unbelievable power. And it's all the same. And so if you smile at adversity, literally you're embracing the suck, you smile at adversity, you smile at your vulnerabilities, it just means nothing else than to say yes to the moment, to say yes to yourself, and to say yes to what you're doing. And if you share that with people, especially your teammates, then it creates, just, the outcome might still be the same, but at least it was more fun to do it.
Yeah, our ability to embrace that, and you used that term a second ago, I think is huge. And as leaders, to get our athletes or our employees or our family, whoever we're leading, right, to get them to embrace those things, because they're going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And you could try to ignore it, you could try to overcome it, you could try to outwork it, but if when you embrace it, you're now attacking it in a different way that I think allows you to, to overcome it, work through it, whatever you're trying to do. Where a lot of people, right, they're scared of it, they try to run away from it, ignore it, whatever. But embracing those moments and teaching those as a leader, teaching those who are following us to embrace those things. Like Eric's point earlier about overcoming adversity or learning from failure. Like, we all want people who are resilient, right? Resilience and resilient is such a huge term positively when we're hiring somebody, when we're having somebody make a team, or making a decision on recruiting somebody. But resilience only comes from failing and bouncing back, right? And so you can't be resilient if you haven't faced those failures and learn from them and come back stronger, right? And being more resilient. Your authentic self. I think every speaker, guest who we've had on this show, when they really get down to it, they really start to talk about where things change for themselves in leadership. It's this idea of being authentic, because all of those who are following us, they can see through the BS, right? And when you're trying to be someone you're not, God has created us all with different gifts and the ability to, to lead and to do things. That when you're yourself, that's when those people will follow you. They're going to listen to you differently. They're going to, want to give their best, right? Because they know what you're about, and they can see that. That was another a huge piece. I'm so glad you brought that, right? You brought that up, because that is huge as we're trying to work with these with the youth, right? In these generations to come.
I mean, there's one caveat to that, right? So in our case, we have a 9 months period that we train and prep, and we go to national championships. But there is, I don't know if they put a number on it, but let's call it 10%. There is the 10% of times or situations where you just need to fake it. Like, if you're going against someone, you just gotta be like, no, you'll be okay. You guys can do that. I have 100% trust in it. Even though you as an expert know that the odds don't look really good. They know, because they're not stupid. And you just got to kind of, that's to push them through the wall, right? And they know that too. But you have to stand there and with 100% confidence and 100% convinced of it. You have to present it and send them in there and hope for the best. Because you owe them that, right? Because if I'm there before this race and they're like, well, what do you think? And I'm like, well, you guys have like a 45% chance of winning this race, but no, go ahead and try to win. I'm not doing them any favors, right? So I get myself to the point where I'm actually so convinced, I'm almost creating an alternative truth. And then again, truth is only after it happens, right? So there is still an option to actually pulling it off, or someone hitting a certain score on the machine or whatever. And sometimes you kind of walk them off a little bit, and maybe you underplay them. Like, no, I don't really think you can do that, but you can try when you know they could do it, but you don't want to put the pressure on them. And then on other cases, it's like you just basically convince yourself that they can do it, and so that you can authentically tell them they can do it, but you know that you're kind of acting it a little bit, But it's those are very rare moments, right? Those are the rare moments. But in that moment, if you're too honest or too much of an expert, then you're also not giving them the gift. You're also not helping them by being too honest. You just kind of let them go out there and see what happens. And in order to do that, sometimes you have to give them a pat on the shoulder and say, you guys, you can do this. Let's go. Even if you kind of deep down, that probably a long shot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's funny when
the moments are there, right? There's just because not saying anything is not good either. So, but it's very rare, and I would even say that our guys, for the most part, they know when I'm doing that, but they get it. You know what I mean? They get it.
What
because you also for yourself. Like you on race day, on game day, you got to be organized. You got to be structured. You got to follow the procedure you practice so many times on how you go about. Because I'm a big believer in sort of routine and planning. So that gives you a good platform to improvise, which is almost always required. So you follow all that, and that day you don't want to come out and be nervous and look like a nervous wreck where you're doubting everything. You got to sort of like be cocky a little bit, like cocksure, they say. Like you just got to act like you own it. Hey guys, we got this. Like there's nothing new. It's just another race. We're still having oars in our hands, and we're still rowing a boat. Nothing has changed. Okay, let's go and execute. And that's when we talk a lot about execution too. Execute. You do that because those are things you can control. And they may know, like there's no, when they realize or when I feel that they know that I'm actually burning up inside, I'm so nervous, not about the win. I'm nervous about, are they going to be able to do the best that they can for themselves? And it always pains me when they don't, because I know how painful it is. But in that moment, for me to be positive, to be optimistic is much better than just being quiet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's what I heard you say there was, I go back to like the gift of competition, right? So like when you're facing someone and you only have 45% chance of winning, therein lies the real value of competition, because that someone that will force you to compete, go to the well more than you ever have before, is a gift. Right? Like that, even if you lose, but you compete and you set a personal record because you were facing a team that pushed you further and faster than you ever had. That's where I would pull like the very early conversations that we had about the gift of competition. And let's celebrate that and be optimistic about that. And hey, the good news is if we execute at a high level and they don't, 45% chance of winning is 45 percentage points more than zero. So you're saying we have a chance. So let's just go out and embrace the spirit and the gift of competition that they're giving us. And like, hey, if someone didn't sleep well last night, or two guys are arguing right now and not getting along, and or one dude was whatever, his girlfriend broke up with him, he's not mentally in a good place, we'll win this thing. But let's just really embrace the gift that the other team's given us, a competition. And this is a great gift because these guys have historically performed better than us. This is all we wanted to do, was earn the opportunity to be here and compete today. So that's where I see like your earlier, perspective of the gift of it's now reverse. It's like, hey, we have a gift to give to the other opponent. Now we're on the receiving end because we're competing against someone that has historically done better than us. Let's embrace the gift that they've given us, and they're going to push us today, and that will allow us to be our best or better than we've been before. And where else can you get that? Like if we were in this boat, in this water by ourselves, we wouldn't have that same advantage. We wouldn't have someone to push us. So I can see how those two come together. So as we
it's literally like, you go against competition like this, and like, well, instead of worrying about a hypothetical outcome, let's just see how many strokes we can hang with.
It's crazy. It just reminded me, I was looking for the picture. A business coach of mine, he always uses the analogy of rowing. And he talks about when you look at the boats, for someone like me too, that doesn't know the intimate details of rowing, everybody kind of looks like they're moving at the same speed. Like you don't see someone that's over there just going twice as fast. And what he talks about is like when you get everybody rowing the same way at the same time, and they have this, focus on precision movement. I don't know if it's correct or not, but it was always a great story to hear that the boat like lifts up out of the water and the resistance is reduced, right? And it's like they almost fly across the top of the water, where everybody else, if they're not in complete precision, doing the right move at the right time, everybody doing their job, there's more resistance and they lose. They go slower than everybody else. And his analogy when he coached businesses is always to use a rowing team and say, if you have everybody doing the right thing at the right time, the right way, it reduces resistance. And we go further and we go faster and further. And he sent me a picture, and I just moved in this new office building, but it's actually this this big picture of a rowing team, and the boat looks like it's flying across the water, and it just says "row together." And it's like a reminder that he sent me as a gift, is like, hey, as a leader, just use that image when you lead your people to try and get the right people in the boat, give them the right training and resources that they need to be able to perform, and then get them to do it together with all of the other teammates. And a lot of the resistance that we face, whether it's leading a team or leading a company or a group of people, comes because we just haven't done those core fundamental things correctly. We brought the wrong people in to the boat. And maybe they physically, which I wanted to ask you about, you said, and I want to be respectful of your time, is you have two things in here. And you talk about mindfulness, meditation, and emotional intelligence, which I think a lot of times in business and in sports and teams, that kind of gets pushed down below like the physical aspect of the game. And everybody looks at like the physical prowess or the technical skills that people have. Could you talk a little bit about like how you've seen something like meditation or emotional intelligence and how that factors into your leadership ability, how you download that into your teams, and then how that applies to performing at a high level?
Well, I started back about 12 years ago now. I started to work with someone that we were brought together by actually a member on the team, and his name is Dr. August Fleming, and he's he was a rower in high school, played football at Columbia, got into all kinds of trouble and addiction and this and that and the other, and finally ended up working in mindfulness and meditation, etc., and performance coach. And we met, and we started this sort of approach for a rowing team, especially for a sort of immature audience of 18 to 22-year-old men, right? That they're still frontal lobe still developing, challenging at times, and introducing those concepts into being able to be in the moment, right? To live the moment, to be in the moment, to be present, to be aware, which is very difficult. And we've tried, because we always train in the mornings. We're usually 6 to 8 during the weekdays in the morning, and so for a few years or here and there, we tried like, well, we'll start every practice as a 5-minute meditation, which you can imagine most of the guys would fall asleep, so that wasn't very helpful. But as it evolved over time, is I keep referencing it on a regular basis. We do exercises every year, and it seems like every year is like a build up. The new guys have no exposure to it, although it's changed. It's actually better nowadays. And then the guys that have already been on the team, they already know the routine, and they're getting better and better at it. But it's basically, I always tell them, like, look, if you spend just 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the evening of just sitting still and connecting with yourself and where you are, just 5 minutes of focusing on your breath, of 3-second inhale, hold, exhale, hold. Do that for 5 minutes twice a day. You do that for a couple of weeks, it will change your life. And those who do it will actually say, "Oh, something has happened. Like something has happened." And what we're doing is basically we're making them aware of how they're paying attention to so many different things, and it comes the power of attention. Because I think a lot of athletes do things like that or are really good at it, but of course the media never focuses on it because that's not interesting to talk about. But I think a lot of athletes are actually a lot deeper into this than anyone would think on the outside. In our sport, it's just the sheer physical requirement and the discomfort that makes them very hungry students on the subject. Because I often would start out and say, like, hey, imagine you could do a 2K, like a 2,000 meter race piece on the erg on the rowing machine without feeling any pain. And of course, there was the summer camp, Kate, right? You've seen it. And of course, everyone, like, would you be interested to hear more about it? And of course, every hand goes in, oh yeah, I want to know the secret sauce, And I'm like, well, it's not that simple, but here's some thoughts and here's some things to start paying attention to. Because at the end of the day, and we do these exercises on the team, is like really like just grueling workouts that are basically you are going to fail no matter what. Like you're going to go to the well, and it's only short like intervals, so it's not like it's forever. but we repeat it a lot. And then every time, each interval, we want them to pay attention to something else and see what works. Starts out with pay attention to loud music, then we turn the loud music off. Then it's like pay attention to your breath, pay attention to something technical. And it gets more and more deeper into like when you really struggle, pay attention to someone that has been in your life that's super important to you in the most positive way. And then the last one is I want you to only the only thing I want you to pay attention to is that I want you to pay attention to your teammate and saying to yourself how you want them to succeed. And then seeing what the result is through all these different steps, and that will open their eyes. So we have come to a point where we would do the last part, the last interval, by playing meditation music. We would start out beforehand where we have like a 1 minute mini meditation of just dial it in and sit there quietly. And then you reach out to because we usually have the machines next to each other. You reach out left and you reach out right and you look a teammate in the eye and you say, I love you and I want you to beat me on this piece. I want you to do better than me. And then you do this last piece and you do this meditation music. And the first time that we done that, I was standing on the side of the room and I had tears streaming down my eyes, and I looked around and I saw other people, coaches that were like deeply moved emotionally. And everyone was wondering like, what just happened? And what it is a transfer of energy, the energy that we give, that we have. And it took them to another level. So most, I would say like 75% of the team physically on just raw data on a machine performed to a level that was absolutely unexpected, like way better than they thought they could ever do. And it's those kind of experiences that make them curious, right? And then, of course, you got some of them are going to have all forgotten all about it a week later, until they need it again. And then, it's like people that only pray when they have a problem, like this is a question of faith. And it doesn't matter who your God is, what your belief is, but this is a matter of faith where you got to have the faith that you can do it and the faith in your teammates that you can do it. And there is a little dirty trick involved in this, which is why when you tell someone else that I wish that you do better than me, you're literally passing the pressure of winning off to this person, and it liberates you. And now you can go at it. And it's like when you have the exercise in the morning where I wish that, this person is going to have more reps than me. And now I'm liberating myself from a number and I'm just doing it. And I'm getting up to the well and I'm just going to count how many strokes or how many reps I've done into the well. You see how all these things are connected, right? And through experience, they will learn how to connect them. And I think it's really individual. Like for some guys, it's like, they have very specific a lot of them do very specific preparation before hard sessions, either as a boat or as an individual. And it kind of varies, and everyone kind of finds their own mojo and how to do that. And later in the season, when we have the team broken down into boats, every boat will find their own way. You got the types that need to like be loose and choke around and act like nothing is bothering them. You got the other ones that are sitting under the tree all meditating together, maybe even holding hands. Like, who knows? Like, there's no perfect recipe. You just got to have to find your way. But for them to realize that there is an untapped superpower, that they can do stuff that they never thought were possible because they're able to be present in the moment and to know what they're paying attention to. And whenever they get pulled off, they turn their attention back to what they need to focus on. And there is a ton of examples for that. Like, that I have myself, like in other sports. And I'm not, by no means, I'm a meditation guru, or my wife would say you are anything but a mindful person. But you actually do have the ability to dial it in, to slow things down, to experience the flow of a top performance at a level that you didn't think even existed. Cases in point are, I used to play a lot of ice hockey where all of a sudden you see a puck flying at you at 80 miles an hour and you see it slow down to super slow motion. You can do anything with this thing. You talk to people that are like, for example, in the shooting sports, that can literally see a bullet hitting a steel plate exploding, which you need a $20,000 camera to capture that, but they saw it. You can see it. Like, all of a sudden, everything just slows down to a level that breaks it down frame by frame at a resolution that's unthinkable. And I've only had these bits and pieces myself, and I see other guys in the team having these bits and pieces. And that just tells you that there is something there that we haven't even tapped into. And I think, physiology, training, technique, it's all pretty predictable. I think the research is pretty good. Now there's a little bit of something, get a 0.5% here and 1% there. I think the mind is like another just a gold mine that no one really believes in because it's not tankable. And even just me talking about this to someone that is not like deeply interested or involved in it or invested in it, will say like, you're a whack job. What are you talking about? What do you mean? God forbid you say the word faith. They think, oh, now he's going to ask me to go to church on Sunday. I'm like, no, there's nothing to do with it. Faith can be whatever you define it as, but when you have it, you know you have it.
Yeah, it's a good friend of mine who's actually a pastor. When he confronts someone and he's trying to have them act in faith, and they push back because they have maybe in their eyes different beliefs. He goes, listen, when I talk about faith, it's only the belief in something that you can't see or touch. However you define that is entirely up to you. And I think like this entire interview, for the most part, from like your perspective on taking care of yourself, the gift to your teammates, the gift to your opponents, all of that is rooted in faith. Going to the well requires faith that you're going to be able to come back. Like fundamentally, you have to believe if I push myself one more level, that I'm not going to die. Right? Because really what your body's telling you, the way it talks you into stopping is because like if it sends you into fight or flight mode, right? And that's hardwired in us to keep us alive, right? So the nature of fear is to protect us, but it'll play dirty tricks on you. It'll tell you that you're in imminent danger, right? Which like the fear for us, and I've read a lot of books on human behavior. It was hardwired in us whenever the human body was designed tens of thousands of years ago, our primary goal was to survive, right? Like not having like a bear attack us in the middle of the woods when we're walking around barefoot with a spear, right? So like we generally don't know the difference, but like fear in the moment when we go to the well feels like a threat on our life. That we're not naturally able to discern the threat of like someone cutting us. That's why people like they get cut off in traffic and they lose their mind, right? Because they think someone like butting in front of them in line was literally a threat to their life. That's how their body transfers it. So yeah, the mindfulness, what I heard you say there, and a note that I'll take to myself as a reminder is like, we're all a certain size. Like I'm never going to be 6'5", right? Like you have physical restrictions to every athlete, every leader, every performer, every teammate. The real value may show up in your ability to perform at an extraordinary level has to be through your mental approach and your ability to operate in faith, go to the well and push yourself beyond what you believe your body's capable of. And that is, to your point, you said it's not tangible. Who knows what that's capable of, right? Yeah. If you get so focused, you can outperform someone that has the same body, the same strength, the same size, the same teammates by enormous differences, right? Like you watch sprinters, and I was watching them in the Olympics, and like two guys are the same size. They train every day. They eat the same food, but one guy beats them by like 12 lengths. That's probably not a physical gap that needs to be closed. It's more than likely a focus and emotional intelligence gap, right? Because it's inexplainable, the physical aspect. It doesn't make sense. He's not bigger, stronger, faster technically. He's mentally stronger, mentally faster, mentally more focused. So I love that is such an important part of your coaching and your approach. And I think it's one of the fundamentals of this show is like, for me, I think sports is such a great, and the spirit of competition is such a great analogy for life. Like everything we've talked about here today, whether it's the spirit of competition and someone at work is pushing you. Stop looking at it as competition and look at it as a gift that if it's another salesperson or someone that's fighting for the same job as you is going to push you to excel or read more or practice more, or develop your skill more. It's actually it's a gift. And that's what's, I think, the true value in this is how we can take these lessons from rowing and competing in the Olympics and collegiate athletes and basketball and say, hey, how does this carry over into to me leading my family or my community or my company or a group of coworkers? And I'm of the belief that our real purpose, why God placed us here, is to, you talked about experience. Like when we worry, it's because we're focused on the future. When we have regret, it's because we're focused on the past. We have real joy when we're present. Like, I don't know, I was riding to work today and I just got emotional because I missed my son. He's off at college. And I like cried tears of joy because I'm just so happy for him. But I was living in the moment. I'm doing it right now. And I got emotional, right? And that emotion for me is what we're intended. Like God intended us for us to have experiences while we're here. And experiences come from now. Like it's happening right now. This show is an experience, right? You got two extraordinary people that I'm here to get you guys brought together. But this is an amazing experience. Like I've learned a lot today. And I'm so thankful that we'll be able to take what we've done here today and push it out. The last thing I want to ask you before we go is a mentor of mine said, management is required when the future is certain. Leadership is required when the future is uncertain. And you shared with us that there's been some uncertainty that came to your team and your life through the passing of some teammates. And I would imagine that challenged you as a person and as a coach and your team as a group. Let's close out today's show and our time together with, can you walk us through, I guess, how you were able to lead these group of people and everything through that extreme amount of uncertainty that happened when you had a teammate and maybe even two that passed away?
I will say, and this may sound pretty bad, but the first thing that comes to mind is that in those moments, the first one, but also the second one, I felt like I was harvesting the fruit of my labor. That all the experiences that I was able to have, all the things I was able to learn, mentors I had, people that helped me. That day, I needed everything to be there for the teammates, the staff, the parents, and I never blinked an eye. I was just harvesting the fruit of everything I had, harvesting the fruits of my labor, of, think I'm being a leader. Well, that shit became real.
Yeah.
And it didn't blink an eye. I just did what one could say. Well, yeah, did what I was maybe meant to do. Why I was put in a situation that I was there at that time for these people, and I never broke down, never hesitated, never nothing. I mean, I did shed tears, sure, at home, or a little bit with teammates, but there was no time for that. I had to be there and give so much to everyone around me that I felt almost euphoric. And that sounds awful, right? Because obviously the circumstances are horrible, but whenever you give, you don't expect anything in return. Whenever you give, you empty out something that you had stored. Whenever you give, you also are experiencing moments of true happiness. And for me, that process really triggered something that I did not expect. And it wasn't until like weeks later where I sort of like finally kind of looked back and like, what happened? You know, why was I able to do this? And then the second time around, which was 5 years later, I mean, look, you never get used to it, right? I mean, it's always, the shock's always there and all that. But at that point, I think, even more valuable because I've already been through it once
Yeah.
and I could trust it.
Yeah. It's, a pastor of mine says, be careful what you pray for. And, in this context, right? Like if you've ever prayed or thought that you deserve to be a world-class leader of men, God's not going to place us, like he's not going to hand us a lottery ticket that says, okay, Coach Frank, this is what you wanted, right? I made you an exceptional leader of men that's resilient and is able to keep a tight upper lip when everything's crashing around you and it feels like you're losing control. What he will, however, do is create the opportunity and the circumstances for us to prove ourselves, right? Like the only way for you to be able to become an exceptional leader is, unfortunately, you had to manage and lead a group of men through extraordinary tragedy, right? And all of the experiences and adversity you had, like I think what you said up to that point of harvesting your fruit was 30 years plus of failure, 30 years plus of adversity, 30 years plus of what in the moment felt like, why is this happening to me? But the reality is the harvesting of the fruit that day, your ability, by the way, thank you for doing what you've done for those young men and those teammates. Like without real leadership in that moment, who knows how they respond? They quit, they give up, they follow suit, right? Who knows without your leadership in that moment. So I just want to thank you for the group of young men that you positively impacted in some capacity are going to be meaningful contributors to this world. And without your leadership in that moment, we diminish their ability to recover from that moment. But my point is that I think as leaders, like it can be a lonely place sometimes, right?
Oh yeah.
But it's a blessing. It's an unfathomable responsibility. Sometimes it feels like I always say, I feel like I'm spinning plates, right? It's like the guys that's on stage, the magicians, where they got all these spinning plates and one's about to fall and we get there just in the nick of time. We have this amazing responsibility to balance not only, I mean, you're leading 20, 30 other families, right? Their children have been entrusted to you, right? And they're eventually going to be leaders and coaches and fathers one day, right? And, but the things that we go through in life we have to go through that in order to be able to respond in moments where our back is against the wall. There's only one way to get to that. You only become an exceptional soldier by going through basic training and this crazy amount of, like, they push you to your body and your wit's end, and the same with practice. So I would just encourage anybody that's listening to this, if you're going through something right now, don't look at it as, why is this happening to me? It's probably an answer to a prayer. If you said you want to be an extraordinary athlete and you're struggling right now, God's teaching you how to learn with adversity. My son went through it last year. He was at his freshman year in college, and Coach Kate, he shot like 48% from three as a senior in high school. He shot 16% as a freshman in college. Mentally challenged him. At some point, he wanted to quit. Not actually, right? We call it quit and stay. Like physically he was there, but mentally he checked out. As a result, he leaned back more into his faith. And now he trains 3 times more than he did when he thought he was an elite athlete in high school. He gets up 2 hours earlier. He sleeps more. He somehow figured out how to get 30 hours worth of work crammed into a 24-hour day. He ended up eliminating wasted energy he had. That was like watching TV, hanging out with some friends that weren't helping him move him closer to his goal. So just know that if you're listening to this and you're going through something, it's part of the process. Like Coach Frank early, like focus on your ability to perform and look at it as a gift and ask yourself, why is this happening for me? Not why is it happening to me? So with that, Coach Frank, Coach Kate, I could sit here and talk for another 2 hours. I'm I'm so thankful for both of you making the sacrifice to be here today and share our experiences with everybody. I think we can close out if you want to just share like one takeaway from today. One moment of discovery or takeaway that we have today.
I mean, I think I would add that, we talked about the Olympics, and sure, all these athletes are super invested, and that's like not even 10% of all of us. It might be 1%, right? And even for them, but for the rest of us, 99%, let's not forget that the sport that we do is nothing else but a stepping stone forward. It's nothing else but an experience. It's as much as we care about performing and winning today, and as important as it is today, and that's good, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's doing it, going through the process of doing it. That's going to, it's just a learning experience. And, at the end of the day, like I tell the guys often, I said, you talk to alumni that they're in their 70s now, they don't talk about winning or losing races. The first thing they always talk about is the experience and the friendship and the trust and the camaraderie. And that is what shaped them. Where you have people, a guy say in front of his wife, it's like, rowing at Virginia was the single most important thing I did in my entire life. And she was like, what? And it was like, this experience made me who I am, honey. If you had known me, if I hadn't done this, you would have never married.
Yeah.
That, like, those are the things that really matter. And that we don't lose sight of that when we get all bogged down in details and things like that we coaches do and athletes do, of course. But like you said, it's a gift it's nothing that has happened to us. It's a gift that has come to us, and it comes in all kinds of shapes and forms, and we don't always see that as what it is.
Yeah, and just embracing that process, right? So as athletes, as those that are going through it, how do we really embrace it and take each day as that gift to work together, to compete with each other, to build each other up, to celebrate the victories, to put a arm around that teammate when it didn't go as well, and to know that all of those experiences are helping us work toward something, right? It could be working towards something in the athletic world, but it could be working towards something in that next chapter. And then we take a step back as the leaders, as the coaches, is how do we continue to get those people to follow that and to believe in that. And that's because we're being authentic, because we're being vulnerable, because we're building that sense of trust. Because it is lifelong, these experiences and the outcome, and then obviously the impact that can be made, through leading. It's lifelong, and as Eric says, it's life or death in some situations as well. And so to hear these stories, Coach Frank, obviously we really appreciate it. I remember, you've told me before the type of person, the type of athlete that wants to be a rower is got to be the person that needs no glory, just wants to beat themselves up over and over again and just work themselves to death in the early hours when all these but it's what you go through to do that. So to hear those stories and the way you approach it and your background and your upbringing, that's been a blessing, to us. I think it's just going to reach a different audience, and just some of these nuggets were so great that it's going to be exactly what people need to hear. I appreciate you being here, with us today, and I'm excited to see how it impacts others in the future.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Eric, Kate. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Coach Kate, you got to get me to come down and visit, and we'll have to go watch some rowing competitions. I'd love to come down and be able to meet Coach Frank in person.
That'd be great.
Anytime, my friends, anytime.
I will take you up on that.
Good.
All right. We'll see y'all. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
All right. Take care, guys.